Hi guys, welcome back to the Awareness Project. Thank you for the tremendous support that you guys showed towards our first video and to our cause of raising social awareness. Hit the bell icon that should be on your screen to be notified whenever we upload a new video on our channel. If you haven't subscribed already and followed us on our social media accounts, please do. Our project is only a success with your support. Okay, now coming back to today's video, I'm going to be talking about ADHD, and then I'm going to show you guys some real life stories of people who shared their stories of adult ADHD with us, and then I'm going to explain what adult ADHD means. So let's begin. ADHD is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a behavioral disorder that is most often diagnosed in children with symptoms such as restlessness, which means they have loads of energy and they are unable to sit at one place for long periods of time. It comes with inability to concentrate, and they need to pace around, and they get easily distracted. So, the symptoms of ADHD have three primary characteristics. The first one is inattention, which doesn't always mean that people with ADHD are inattentive, but that their attention is basically all over the place. The second one is hyperactivity. With the short attention span, there is also constant activity, not only in terms of behavior, but also of the thoughts and emotions. This aspect makes emotional regulation harder for people with ADHD than the rest of the population. Lastly, impulsivity. Impulsivity is basically acting without thinking, which means that people with ADHD are often prone to making rash decisions. There are many other symptoms of ADHD, and no two people with ADHD experience these symptoms the same way. So it's harder to put them in just one box. And if you had to use one word to describe the lives of people with ADHD, it would be chaos. There's just disorganization in things and their mind. But this doesn't mean that ADHD is a weakness. A lot of people with ADHD often describe it as a superpower. People with ADHD usually have high IQ and they have loads of creativity and passion. They're extremely hard workers, but because of the disorder, the only problem is they don't yield as good results as they could, even when they put the same effort or more than others. But the treatment rates of ADHD are very successful, which means that with the right dose of medication or cognitive behavioral therapy by a trained professional or just management of symptoms on their own can really help them gain optimal functioning. After all, people with ADHD are able to produce more results in the same amount of time than other people because of their levels of productivity that they can generate once they actually get to it. It's just that they have trouble starting, and when they get started, they get distracted easily. But once they start, well, they have trouble stopping, but that also means that really productive and focused because of a thing called hyperfocus. Now, what we are going to talk about is adult ADHD. Adult ADHD doesn't mean that the person suddenly gets ADHD in adulthood, because ADHD is a lifelong experience. It just means that they go undiagnosed until they have reached adulthood. The symptoms are present throughout a person's life. And there are many reasons why it is the most common psychiatric condition that goes undiagnosed. One of the major ones is comorbidities that come with ADHD, like depression, anxiety, and substance abuse disorders. So, these disorders get diagnosed, but the real reason behind them, which is often ADHD, is left undiagnosed and thus untreated. They have extreme potential, but just because they go undiagnosed for a long period of time, it often doesn't lead to the levels of productivity that they can actually have. It's like something just doesn't click for them. So, now I'm going to show some video clips of some amazing people that contributed to this video and shared their lived experience with us to help others be more aware about this disorder and about how it went undiagnosed until the later stages in their lives.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm 29 years old and I was just diagnosed with combined type ADHD and an associated math learning disability. I guess I sort of always knew that something was a little bit different. It's kind of like I was a puzzle piece from one puzzle that fit into another. I fit the space, but I never really fit the whole picture. And because I wasn't a destructive child growing up, they missed my diagnosis. I didn't get to grow up with the support and the resources that I desperately needed. And later in life, I was lucky enough to start dating someone who has ADHD. And one day he looked up at me and he said, "Hey, I think you might be just like me." So I decided to go and have extensive neuropsychological testing done, and it turns out that he was right. So here I am, almost 30, and finding out this massive part of information about myself.
I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 19, and around the same time I was also diagnosed with epilepsy. And the main problem for me personally was that pretty much all of the known ADHD medication also causes epileptic seizures. So I had to go untreated with my ADHD after the seizures got really bad. I was using ADHD medication, basically Concerta, to be able to go on with my PhD. I just couldn't stop passing out. That's why I had to quit. For years, I've just been trying to, just live with it without treating it at all. Now we're gonna try to up the dosage with the epilepsy medication. Actually use two of them at the same time, and add Concerta on top of it, and see if I can take it without passing out. We'll see what happens.
So the reason I decided to do this video is actually very personal. While I'm not professionally diagnosed with ADHD yet, I realized a few months back that I might have ADHD. And when I came to this realization after a lot of research in the topic, it's like everything just made so much more sense. So ADHD in my life shows up as shifting from one topic to another, or one thing to another without even realizing it. I'm always trying to do like 5 tasks all at once. An inability to concentrate, maybe while reading a book, I often just read the whole page and I don't realize that I have actually not retained any of the information that I just read. So as a kid, that obviously led me to a lot of trouble, because I can, even till this date, I cannot concentrate in class without doodling or fidgeting with my pen or something. So as a kid, that meant a lot of punishments for biting my nails or my pen. And one of those kids who could never stop talking in class. Yes, that was me. As a kid, I was an extremely hard worker and I achieved good results. But as I grew up, my inability to concentrate made me achieve lesser grades than I could have. I wish I was diagnosed earlier, but I'm still hoping for my diagnosis to get done soon, and so I can get the proper treatment for it.
I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 30. I had started a new job, and after about a year, I was very overwhelmed with the workload, and I couldn't really understand how my performance was so different to my colleagues despite my effort being probably double. It caused me to use some unhealthy crutches in my life and seek counselling, and then that allowed me the space in my mind to really explore why I was acting in certain ways and why the problems in my life have been reoccurring since I was around 13. So I looked at my old school reports and they were really a smoking gun. All signs pointed to ADHD. I booked in for a private assessment and I came out as being diagnosed with ADHD.
I'm Mohammed, I'm 41 years old. I've got dyspraxia, Asperger's traits. In February 2020, I told the counsellor I didn't have focus mind. She knows I was hyperactive and having a nervous breakdown, not eating very well. She told my GP practice I've got symptoms of ADHD. It seems to make sense. I couldn't make decisions. I'm hyperactive. I haven't got focus. I can't manage my emotions. It's worse in minority communities, I think, because of stigma, getting diagnosis. It's hard as an adult because lack of awareness. People think it's a child condition, And also, if you have high qualifications, higher IQ. I got a degree, postgrad, professional qualifications out of support. I don't have very good work history. And everything seems to go wrong in my life. Hope things improve for the future.
I only got diagnosed with ADHD about 2 or 3 years ago, even though I've suffered from symptoms my whole life. People are always saying, you wait a minute, you lost go back to you've lost the gist of the story. And I remember saying to somebody once, to me, when I'm talking to someone or to a few people and I'm relating something, I'm also visualizing it. I'm relating a story because I'm a writer at heart. And sometimes it's like I'm careening down this hallway or this tunnel. And suddenly a side opening comes, which has bright colors, a side opening. I suddenly think, oh, that looks interesting. And I suddenly go off on that. And then I'll go off on a different one. And I'll completely forget what I was talking about. And this doesn't just happen when talking. This happens with daily life. Because I'll go into the kitchen to get a screwdriver. And I'll notice that I've left something on the stove from the night before. And I go to put it in a plastic container. And then I'll go and put it in the refrigerator, and then I'll realize that I'm hungry, and I think, what should I eat? What should I eat? And then I think, well, I'm really thirsty. Let's just have a cup of tea. And I completely forget what I started out to do. And I know this tends to happen in older age anyway, but this has been happening to me for decades. The best you can do is try to look at it as an adventure. And now sometimes when I go into the kitchen or leave a room to go find something, I tell myself, okay, packing tape, packing tape. I make myself repeat it as I'm walking into the kitchen, packing tape, so I don't forget what I'm doing, because otherwise you can spend your whole day just trying to focus on one thing. Finishing tasks, having a lot of interests in things like sewing or putting a puzzle together or reading a book or all kinds of different interests, but finding it very hard. As soon as I got to slight hiccup, or a slight corner I had to turn, I would put it aside and go start something else. And I'd find it very hard to complete the project. Once I was diagnosed, I can't tell you what a load off my mind it was, off my life it was, because I realized there was an excuse, it was an explanation for the way I was.
The thing that I want people to know about ADHD would be that, particularly in women, it presents really differently to what the stereotype might be, and that anxiety and overthinking can also be a form of hyperactivity. So it might not be obvious on the outside, but that doesn't mean that someone doesn't have ADHD, and that every ADHD is really different. I really wish everybody would read about it, because it's a pretty huge condition, and if you don't know about it, then you know that the chances are you could undermine someone or upset somebody who is really struggling with this condition.
So, being a psychology student in high school and then majoring in psychology during university, I never realized that I might have ADHD myself. And I was also seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist for other psychological issues during my adolescent years, and they also never realized that I might just have ADHD. Because of my other symptoms, other comorbidities, ADHD was hidden at the back, and nobody ever realized that the underlying cause of my other issues could be just ADHD. So the point of sharing this story with you guys is that with my own psychologically informed background and professionals around me, nobody ever even thought that these symptoms I had could be an underlying cause of ADHD. So my point basically being that it is that hard to often get diagnosed with ADHD, and that's why people just suffer in silence without even realizing it.
A Pakistani psychiatrist told me borderline Asperger's syndrome is associated with mental health illness, i.e. ADHD, because ADHD is a learning difficulty and mental health illness. Hope there's more research and understanding in the media, hopefully find more solutions to improve the lives of people with these conditions, so less people suffer.
It was both wonderful in the sense that it's like my brain speaks a language that I didn't know it was speaking, and I now have the opportunity to speak to other people who speak that language. But on the other hand, I'm mourning the person I could have been if I had known sooner. And the professionals that I've come across are mostly wonderful and have been incredibly wonderful resources for me. But on the other hand, I've also run into a lot of issues, particularly with insurance companies and people believing that ADHD is only for children, and it's not. If anything, those of us who suffer ADHD into adulthood suffer permanent and incredibly damaging problems. And I guess if I had to let you know one thing, it's that having ADHD is chronically painful, and as much as it is my biggest strength, it is also my hardest weakness.
Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and it fulfilled its purpose of raising some social awareness. So if you are someone with ADHD and you have trouble with staying productive, I have written a blog about it and you can find the link in the comments. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.